Good evening, all. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to the fifth session of the Professional Development Program. Now, I call upon Professor Kalaiarasan to give welcome address and introduce our resource person.
Good evening to one and all present here. On behalf of the Department of Commerce Shift 2 and IQAC, I welcome all the participants for day 5 preparing for data analysis session. I'm happy to introduce the resource person for today, Dr. A.G. Vijayanarayanan, sir, Assistant Professor, PG and Research Department of Commerce, DG Vaishnava College, Chennai. Dr. Vijayanarayanan has been qualified with doctorate in commerce and specialized in data analytics with a postgraduate diploma in software-based statistical analysis. He was best vote University 4th rank at MCOM from University of Madras. He holds UGC National Eligibility Test in Commerce and Tamil Nadu State Eligibility Test in Commerce and Management streams. He has proficiency and hands-on experience in SPSS software for more than a decade. Dr. Vijayanarayanan is a life member of various professional bodies like Indian Commerce Association, Indian Accounting Association, the Indian Econometric Society, Indian Society for Probability and Statistics, and Indian Academic Researchers Association. He has been the external examiner for PhD Viva Voce examination at Bharathidasan University. Besides, he has successfully completed 3 refresher courses in commerce and data analysis for social science teachers in Swayam from Sri Ram College of Commerce and University of Hyderabad, respectively. He is a member of Board of Studies for PG Board in Commerce at Guru Nanak College Autonomous and Grand City University, and he has been resource person for delivering guest lectures at various colleges, institutions at national and international level. 35 research papers at national level and 7 international papers are added to his credit, of which 20 papers have been published in Scopus journals and remaining were published in UGC CARE list with ISSN numbers. He was awarded the Best Paper Presenter Award in 2nd International Conference on Business and Management, Bangalore. He has also acted as a resource person in various conferences, seminars, workshops, and panelist in panel discussion. With this brief introduction, on behalf of the Department of Commerce Shift 2 and IQAC Petition College of Arts and Science, I invite Dr. A.G. Vijayanarayanan, sir, to take over the session. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thanks for the nice introduction. Hope I can share my screen.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think my screen is visible to everyone, right?
Yes, sir, it's visible.
Yeah, thank you. So, Vanakkam and good afternoon, everyone. At the outset, I thank the organizers of the Patrician College for calling me once again to share my experience on the research, a little experience which I have it. Thank you so much for that. And today, I'll be speaking on the preparing the data for analysis, which is mostly a neglected part. Okay. I fail on my duty if I don't thank my professors, if I don't thank my gurus, without whom I'm definitely not here today. So at this juncture, I definitely extend my warm thanks to my guide, my PhD supervisor, Dr. M.V. Arlalan, who was a former syndicate member, University of Madras. He is my alma mater. If I'm having any research experience for almost a decade. It is only because of him and his guru, Dr. M. Ranganathan, who was a former registrar and head of the Department of Commerce, University of Madras, and his guru, Dr. O.R. Krishnaswamy. And apart from that, I should also thank my department, the PG and Research Department of Commerce, Vaishnav College, my HOD and Dr. SSN sir, and all the college authorities for encouraging me to pursue my interest. So thank you all for that. With that note, let me get into the schedule. So this is how the program outline or a schedule will be. Before starting with the preparing the data for analysis, I just have some prelude. I wanted to have some prelude which you would have definitely heard in previous yesterday's class. So with that, and then we'll go for data validity and what are the steps which are to be prepared for preparing the data for the analysis, and then we'll go into the data reliability test, which we normally call it as Cronbach alpha. Okay, so that reliability test and other things, and then the normality of the test, and there are some tips which I have it to share for the better analysis. So this is what the program outline which I have done it. Probably you can see here or there somewhere I would have used some pictures. You can see it here. When you two have finished arguing your opinions, I actually have data, obviously, because fact speaks. Okay, because when we are biased, argument arises, but when we go with the fact, there is no more argument there. And you can see here also, here is a list of 1 lakh warehouses full of data. I would like to condense them down to meaningful. So in order to make it more meaningful, because today if you look at it, statistics is everywhere. Even you and me is a part of a statistics. Now if I want to say, I will say that as of now there are 256 participants and it is increasing, 257, 258. Okay, so even that is a data. But what is that I'm going to get out of it? What is the meaning that I'm going to get out of it? That is very important. Statistics is not just about numbers. It is about much more than that. Okay, just mere numbers cannot be called as or cannot be considered as a statistics. Okay, right. With that prelude, first I wanted to speak more on the scales, because without knowing these scales, it would be meaningless to read about what is statistics and what are the different statistical techniques and how to prepare the data. It will be really meaningless if we do not understand what is scales. Okay, probably I come to know that in your first session you would have heard about what is a research problem and how to consider a topic selection and other things. And the second one will be of review of literature, I guess. And because of the review of literature, probably you will try to understand what the subject is all about and how the variable should be considered, right? And in the next session, you would have got with how to formulate a hypothesis, which are to be tested. Okay, that is what the data analysis actually deals with. That will be dealt tomorrow. But I'm in between the data collection and the data analysis. That is what we call it as a data processing. That is what I'm going to speak today all about. Okay, and yesterday you would have definitely heard about what are the different types of sampling techniques, how the sample size should be, and other things, right? So I'll just start with this small prelude of what the scaling is all about. See, whatever the different kinds of scales which are available in social sciences, okay, arbitrary scale, judgment scale, Thurston scale, Likert scales, and whatever the scales may be, all the scales can be classified into 4 categories. The first one is the nominal, ordinal, interval, and ratio. These are the 4 scales which are available or can be classified. The first one, the nominal scale, as the name suggests, it is a nomination. A number is assigned to denote something. That's it. Now let's say, take the case of gender. Okay, female 1, male 0. I'm just assigning a number to denote something. When I say female 1 and male as 0, it doesn't mean that female is better than male. No, it doesn't mean that. Here the number 0 and 1 do not have any values. But what does it mean? 1 denotes female, 0 denotes male. That is a number nominated. That's all. It doesn't have anything else more than that. The number do not have any values. So that is what we call it as nominal scale. The next one is the ordinal scale, where there is some order. Okay, there is an order in it. Now let's say I ask, what is your socio class? I belong to low class, low economic class, middle economic class, higher economic class. So now there is an order in it. Now let's say I give 1 for low, 2 for middle, and 3 for high. So that's an ordinal scale. Okay, there is some order in it. Okay, the next one is the interval scale. This is where the mostly this 5-point Likert scale or any other 5-point scales, okay, for that matter, that comes into interval, because now this is becoming measured. This interval scale and ratio scale, we call it as a measured scale, whereas the nominal scale and the ordinal scale, we call that as a categorical scale, because in that there is only category. Now let's say in gender there are only 2 categories, male, female. You can also add up this transgender based on what kind of a study that you do. In ordinal scale also there is a group. What is the monthly salary that you fit in? Less than 20,000, 20 to 40,000, 40 to 60,000. So there are groups. There is a category. So that's what we call nominal and ordinal scale as a categorical scale. Whereas in interval scale, it is measured. Now I ask you, what is your opinion about the online purchase? Rate your experience in Amazon or your experience in Flipkart, okay? On a scale of 1 to 10 or on a scale of something like that, okay? If I ask like that, then that becomes measured. Interval scale, okay? And then the last one is the ratio scale, which is actually measured. In interval scale, I just forgot to add up one point. In interval scale, there is an order and also there is an equal distance. Say, for example, the distance between strongly agree and agree is as equal as the distance between strongly disagree and disagree. So there is a equal length of measurement is there. In ratio scale, there is an origin of measurement, which means it starts with some origin. What is that origin? 0. Now, let's say you ask me, what is my age? I will say I'm 40 years old. I ask another person, what is his age? He says 20 years. Then I can conclude that I am twice the age of him. Why? Because when he says 20, it is from 0 to 20. And when I say 40, I say 0 to 40. So there is an origin because of which we can compare it. Now, let's say my weight is 100 kgs, okay? And someone else is having 50 kgs. Then again, I can say that I am twice the weight as him. Why? Because it's from 0 to 50 and I am from 0 to 100. So therefore, ratio scale is the most appropriate scale and it is measured from the origin, that is 0. To be more precise, you can look into this order, distance, and origin. There are 3 parameters in which a scale will be estimated. In case of nominal scale, there is no order, there is no distance, there is no origin, nothing. Whereas in case of ordinal, remember that example of low class means low economic class, middle economic class, higher economic class. There is an order, but there is no distance, there is no origin. The distance between the low and the middle income may not be the equal of middle and higher income. Whereas in case of interval scale, there is an order, there is a distance, but there is no origin point. That is the 0. Because if you see that 5-point Likert scale, it starts with 1 and ends up with 5. There is no origin point there, okay? And if you look at the ratio scale, there is an order, there is a distance, there is an origin. So this is the prelude or the beginning that I wanted to say. Without knowing this, proceeding it to the next level is of no use, okay? So I just wanted to cover up this scaling part. I hope it is clear. Probably you can chat on it. Means if you have any questions, you can chat. I wanted to be more interactive. I will try to make it more little interactive. But yes, due to the huge respondents, it may be very difficult for us, but still you can always chat and I will try to answer your questions to the maximum possible. If I do not know, probably I will learn and I will answer your questions tomorrow. Okay, so moving on further. Now we will go to the measurement. See, any research to be more scientific, there are 3 things which we need to see. One is the validity of the data. The second one is the reliability of the data. And the last one is the practicability or practicality of the data. Okay, what is validity? What is valid? I am doing a research on a particular topic. Okay. And on that, if I ask some question to you as a you are my respondent. Okay. If I ask some question to you, that question should be linked to the topic what I do. Let's say I'm doing a study on online consumer purchasing behavior satisfaction. Okay. Now, if I ask whether you are satisfied with your job, has it got any meaning to do with online purchase? No. So validity is that what we measure, what we try to ask to the respondent. Basically, all our research comes under the category of social science research. So whatever that I say is applicable for all the social science fields, okay, which includes history, anthropology, psychology, management, commerce, economics, everything. Okay. So what should we ask in the questionnaire? Should be in line with or in sync with the particular topic of study that we make. So whatever the questions that we ask should be related to the topic. The question should not be, and if it is not correlated or if it has got nothing to do with the topic, then don't ask. So number one, what to ask. Number two, how to ask. That is what the validity means. That is what I have mentioned here. Content validity and construct validity. Content validity means what to ask, what not to ask. That you should be very, very clear. So what happens when you prepare the questionnaire? Immediately don't send it to the respondents. First, prepare the questionnaire, read yourself, see whether all the questions are related to your topic, and then give it to some subject matter expert of that particular topic so that he can give better inputs to you. So that is how the content validity can be elaborated or it can be improvised. And construct validity, definitely you need to know the scales. That is what I'm saying. See, if you want to do all the parametric tests like t-test, f-test, because most people are fond of doing those kind of a test, right? So those are all parametric tests. So if you want to do that, then your scale must be in interval scale or ratio scale. I would like to bring one example. When I said the same thing in my MCOM class, okay, it may be very funny for you, but that made me to think about it. Once I said, if your scale is in interval scale and ratio scale, then you can do for you can do parametric test. Then immediately one boy prepared a questionnaire for his MCOM project. First question, age, then monthly income and other things. Then he asked gender, male, female. The next question, sub question. Under the gender, there is a sub question, male, female. Okay. If male, strongly agree, agree, neutral, disagree, strongly disagree. Since I said interval scale is better for doing parametric analysis, he has asked the question for gender. Male tick பண்ணிட்டு அதுக்கப்புறம் என்ன அதுல strongly agree, strongly disagree. Hope you can understand it, right? So what question should be asked and how it should be framed, how it should be scaled, that is very important. Now let's say, for example, monthly salary. You want to ask a question on monthly salary. If you give it open, okay, many of them will not answer, correct? Because if you ask my salary, I will not say what is my salary. 30,000, 40,000, 45,000, whatever it is. It may be 10,000, whatever the salary, okay? But if now, since the people are not ready or hesitating to say what their salary is, people are going for classification. What kind of a classification? Less than 25,000, 25,000 to 50,000, 50,000 to 75,000. That category is there. Now people will be okay to answer it. Okay. So depends on what kind of a study, how to, how to prepare the questionnaire. These validity tests are very, very important. Regarding the reliability, I will deal in the towards the end of the session. And in practicality, yes, you should also think about what are the factors of economy and the convenience. That is very, very important. These are the things which we need to consider. So this is about the validity of data. What to ask, how to ask, very important. Right now, I'm getting into the main content of today's topic. How to prepare the data for analysis. Sir, what is there in it, sir? Once we collect the data, immediately we'll go to SPSS or any other statistical software tool. We'll feed the data and we'll start analyzing. No, That is not the right way of doing it. That is not the way. There is, see, in today's world, it has become, the research has become a very, very easy task. Just think about, there are few people here who would have completed your PhD some 10 years ago, right? Ask themselves, like how they collected the data. They will prepare a questionnaire, take a hard copy printout of it, and go to the respondent, each and every respondent, and they will collect the data, and then they will feed that questionnaire data in Excel. And then after doing it in Excel, that they call it as a master data sheet or something like that. Okay. After that, they take it for analysis. But today, thanks to Google, it has made our job much easier, right? Because what do we do now? We prepare some questionnaire, we prepare it in Google Forms, and just like that, we send that link to all the respondents and we make them to answer, correct? But that's not the right way of doing it, because what happens, and once the data sheet comes, once the data is filled, it comes in Excel format, and immediately we download it and we start doing the analysis. No, it is not the right way. There is a big stage between the data collection and the data analysis. Now you have collected the data. Immediately you should not go for data analysis. There are certain procedures which we call it as data processing. What are they? Editing, data coding, data classification, and data tabulation. Classification and tabulation today, it has become much more mechanical. So we are not much into that classification and tabulation, but data editing and data coding are very, 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 very important process that we need to do. That's why it's called processing of data. Only when it is done, then we will see, when you collect the data in Google Forms, let's say gender, either they would have chosen male, female. What is your educational qualification? They would have chosen UG, PG, professional, PhD. So if you look at that Excel, it will be in words only. So with words, you cannot go for analysis, right? Only with numbers, we can do the analysis, right? So that words should be converted to numbers. That is what the coding is all about. Okay. But before doing that, data editing is required. Okay. I'll get into all these aspects. So data editing, data coding, data classification, and data tabulation. These are the 4 important stages in data processing. There is one more called transcription. Probably we will look into it. What is data editing? It is the process of examining the data collected to detect the errors and omission. See, there are 2 things which may happen. 1, there may be some error. 2, there may be some blank left out, that is unanswered, that is omission. Okay. So what should be done with that 2 aspects? Okay. So data editing at the time of recording the data and data editing at the time of analyzing the data. Okay. Let me skip this because I'm going to tell you in practical. Okay. Now, what are the problems that may arise and what should you figure out? Number 1, check whether all the questions are answered. Look for the completeness of the data, because if there is any blank, then that blank should be filled. Without that, keeping it as blank, taking it to the analysis will have no meaning. Now, let's say I'm asking, what is the, again, I'll take the same examples to be in a better understanding. What is your satisfaction level of online shopping? I ask with 100 people. Only 75 people say, okay, 25 people have not answered that. Now, if I collect that and if I apply mean, median, and all those things, it will give for 100 people. But how many people actually have answered? Only 75 have answered. There is an incompleteness with 25 people. Now, what happened? When I have all the 100 answers and divide by 100, I get the real mean. But when I don't do that way, when I'm not going for data editing, then it leads to wrong answers. Because when the data is not complete, then data analysis will give us a wrong interpretation, will give a wrong meaning. There is no problem with statistical techniques. It is the problem with the researcher. Okay. So look for all the questions, whether it has been answered or not. Number 2, look whether it has properly been answered or not. Sir, how to check it? Random checks will enable us to find out the errors. Don't worry, I have come up with the live data which I have collected almost 2 days ago. Okay, some 638 respondents or something like that. I also have a questionnaire. I will show how people have made blunders. That is how the respondents have made errors. I'll show that. Okay. I have not manipulated any, just to make you to show, I have not manipulated any data. It is the actual data which I have received it. I will show you. And then look whether any bias is there and inconsistencies is there or not. So these are the problems which we should look into in case of data editing. Okay, what can be done? What are the practical guidelines which a data editor should do? See, this is not basically limited only to the academic research. This is also something more than academic research, which I'm actually catering into. Okay, I'm not focusing only with a PhD or article or something like that. I'm saying with a greater purview, I'm speaking on this. Okay, the editor should have a copy of the instructions given to the interviewers, because when there is a big study which is happening, there will not be one person who is collecting the data. There will be various people collecting the data. Now, let's say, for example, now you had all this exit poll survey and other survey, right? One person is not going to collect the data. All the people, there will be many people employed to collect the data. So in that case, everyone should be given a copy of the instruction, like how to collect, where to collect, who should be the audience, something like that. Okay. So there will be many people who are into it. One. Number two, the editor should not delete the entry. It should be kept. Okay. You can make another copy and then you can delete the unwanted responses. Okay. But the actual original entry should be retained. That is very important. Number three, all answers which are modified or filled in afresh by the editor should be indicated. Now, let's say, I'll give an example for this. Okay. There's one person who says that he's unmarried. But there is one more question. What is that? How many child you have? He says 2 child. The answer is, he's saying is 2 child, but he says in marital status as unmarried, which means that he is wrong. So we can deduce or infer that that guy or that respondent is a married man and he has 2 children. So that unmarried should be converted or should be corrected to married. Okay. So those things, when the data editor does it, it should be indicated with some colors or something like that. Okay. Some marks should be there that that data was corrected by the data editor. And all the completed schedules, this is basically an old point, because now we don't have any schedule or a questionnaire, right? Now we are going for this electronic Google Forms and other things. Okay. But all the completed schedules should have the signature of the editor along with the date. So these are the things which they have been practicing in our from our olden times. Okay. So this is about the data editing stage, right? Hope I am audible, and I think people can follow me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
It's audible,
Right.
sir.
Okay. Again, I'm coming with these 2 points. One is the completeness. The other one is the other point which I'll be saying. Look for the example. Completeness. Okay. First. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Marital status is not mentioned, and the respondent may have answered for other questions like they have number of children. If they have not answered the marital status, from this we can deduce it. We can say that he is married, and so we can fill that with married status. Okay. And you can see here family income is not mentioned, but he has given something about what is the monthly consumption and monthly saving. From that also we can deduce to an extent what may be his income level if it's in groups. Okay. So these things can be done when the data is incomplete. Okay. If the vital information is not available, then the researcher should contact the respondent and get the data from him again. This is very important. Okay. When very important information, if something is not available, and if we cannot infer or deduce out of it, then we need to contact the respondent and get it. Sir, what if I don't, if I could not connect with the respondent? Very simple. You should take the data off from your study, because there is no other option. You cannot have your own answers in it. Okay. It is that respondent's opinion. You cannot manipulate the data. Okay. So if none of these could be resorted to the data, and it should be marked as missing, and it should be removed of the study. So that is with respect to the completeness of the data. The second one is about the accuracy of the data. I'm going to show all this in a live example. Okay. There's one where you can say that the total monthly income is lesser than total consumption. Then again, it's an faulty answer. Okay, and you can see here age group is mentioned as 20 to 30. If when asked what is your occupation, he says he's retired. Again, this is contradicting, right? And marital status as single, and he has responded for number of children. So all these are non-accuracy of the data. So these things should be considered and should be taken care. Only after all these things, you should take the data for analysis. That is why I'm saying this data processing is a very, very important critical area which many people ignore it. Okay. You know why answers are not, sometimes the answers are not appropriate or not to the extent of what we require. It is only because of these things which we ignore. Okay, right. So we have done with first one, that is data editing, right? The next one is the data coding. This is a very, very crucial other important aspect of it. Give me a minute. Right. Once the data editing is done, all the data is ready. We have this master data sheet with us. Okay. What next? All the words should be converted to numbers. Correct? Because only when it is converted to numbers, we can take that for the analysis. Right? Now, that is where the data coding actually happens here. Okay? There may be 2 or 3 different ways in which you can go for data coding. One is the numerical coding, where we assign a number to a particular variable or an attribute by number. Number 2, alphabetic coding, where we denote with some alphabets. Okay. The third one is the zero coding. This is very important. When we have no response or a blank for a particular column, then we can fill that with zero, provided that zero is apt there. Now, let me give an example for this. Let's say there is some question which you are asking in yes or no. Okay, you give yes as 1 and no as 2, and somebody has not responded for that question. For that blank, you can either give 0. Okay, but that again depends on what kind of a question. Now I ask this way: how many number of children do you have? Okay, for a married people, let's say 1 child, 2 child, more than 2 child. I give 3 options. Some respondents I have not answered. There I cannot use 0, because there may be people where they may be newly married, they may not have children. So you can have no children also as an option. So you can give 0 for no children. And for those who have not answered, then probably you can give some other number like 4. Now 0 represents no child. They don't have a child. 1 represents 1 child. 2 represents 2 child. 3 represents more than 2 child. And for the blank, now I use 0. So when you use 0, you must be very, very careful and cautious with what is that question is all about. Okay, that is very important. You can see it here. When you have a questionnaire, you can allot a number for each questions. Okay, that is what we call it as a coding frame. Okay, and there are some general rules in coding. Each respondent should be given a code number. Every respondent, we call that as cases in terms of statistics. Okay, respondents means cases. Okay, they must be given a number. If let's say, for example, I collected from various cities, Chennai, Bangalore, okay, Madurai, something like that. So I'll give CH1. CH means Chennai. 1 is the first respondent. CH2, CH3, MD1, MD2, something like that. That represents that respondent. Okay. So all the respondents should be given the coding 1. Number 2, each qualitative question should also have codes. There are some qualitative questions which we may ask, like we say other, define others. In others, let's say educational qualification, UG, PG, professional degree, PhD degree, others. That others can be anything. It can be a diploma holder, it can be a DTED, okay, anything of that. So for all those qualitative various answers also, we should assign some number. That is what we call it as a data coding. Okay. Now how to do that? I have given something here. In nominal scale, yes, I have given it as 1. No, I have given it as 2. That's the right way of doing it. But if you give 0, because if there is no response, then we should assign 0 as no response. Okay. If you can also give 1 and 0, provided what question is all about. Okay. If it's an ordinal scale, there should be an order in it. Low is 1, middle as 2, high as 3. Okay. You cannot have like this: low as 2, middle as 3, high as 1. That order should not be changed. Okay. That coding order should not be changed because it's an ordinal scale. The next one is the interval scale. Always the positive will have the highest value. That is the easy way to remember. So strongly agree is the most positive and it will have the value of 5. And strongly disagree is the least negative and it will have the value of 1. Many a times people change the numbers. They just juggle it. No, it's not the right way of doing it. Okay. The maximum positive will have the maximum value. In our Indian and other Asian continents, we use this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. If you take the same strongly agree to strongly disagree in case of Europe or in case of America, they use this -2 to +2. -2, strongly disagree. Disagree, -1. Neutral, they give 0. Agree, they give 1. Strongly agree, they give 2. Okay. They go with that numbers, -2 to +2. Whereas for us, we go with this 5 to 1. You can follow whatever the way, provided if you are comfortable with it. And in ratio, there is no problem because it is all measured. Because your height is measured in terms of centimeters, weight is measured in terms of kilograms. Okay, so it is the actual data. That's how the coding should be done. You can see it here, alphabetic coding. For private organizations, I use PT, public, PB, and government GO. So if I say CHPT 121, it means that there is a respondent belonging to the private organization and from Chennai, and his number is 121. So I can identify who that person is all about. Okay, so that is what we call it as data coding. So we have gone through 2 things. One is the data editing, the other one is the data coding. Moving on, next is the data classification. What is classification? Very simple. There is a voluminous data. It is being condensed. It is being reduced. Data reduction technique. Okay. How do you reduce the data? With some homogeneity. Now let's say I have different weight. Okay, one has given 30, one has given 40, one has given 100, one has given 200. I have some 10,000 data from 10,000 people. Okay, now if I want to classify, very simple. I'll say 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, up to 90 to 100. When I do that, I classify in 10 categories. It's very simple. All the 10,000 people are being classified with 10 classifications. Very simple. All the people who are weighing between 20 and 30, they will come under that category. 40 to 50, they will be classified in that category. Okay, so this data classification is basically based on the homogeneity or the similarity. We condense the voluminous data into a manageable one. Okay, that is what now if you look at the big data and other there are some very big statistical developments are going in the statistical world. They get involved into that. Okay, now you can see in YouTube, whatever that you are thinking or pondering upon, you get advertisements like that. How? There is some YouTube algorithm which actually works on it. How does that YouTube algorithm works? Based on what kind of a search that you do it in Google or whatever the platform. Okay, they take up your data from that, and accordingly they send the advertisements, right? So that's all. It's because of this basic classification and other things. Okay, right. So what are the different types of classification? Based on the external characteristics, if you look at, you can go for geographical, state wise, city wise, and chronological based on the order. In what is the price of the petrol from 2000 to 2020? So chronological order. Okay, so that's based on the external characteristics. And in terms of internal, based on the attributes or the variable, based on gender, based on the caste, based on the occupation, you can do all these things. And in that you can see simple classification and complex or the manifold classification. Here you can see the classic example. In teaching, what is the percentage of male and female? I am again further classifying. Very simple. Okay. In terms of magnitude of the variable, discrete variable. Discrete means an exact number. You can see it here. 0 children, which means there is no child. 1 child, 2 children, 3 children, 4 children. So that's a discrete number. Okay. Whereas continuous frequency distribution means there you will have a lower limit and the upper limit. Okay. Now what is the percentage of the students who have got mark from 30 to 40 and 80 to 90? Now we are trying to classify, because 30 to 40 is just a minimum pass mark, and we are we are going to focus on them. And 80 to 90 is a high scoring people. So we will give an additional teaching for them. And for 30 to 40, we will focus more on that. So if you want to know that, then that's a continuous frequency distribution. Okay. So this is how the classification can be done. Okay. And one point in this which I wanted to mention, a classification method should meet certain requirements or should be guided by certain rules. Not many people follow this, but this is one point which I wanted to insist on it. Now, let's say when you do any PhD or any academic or non-academic research, right? We come up with some categories. Now, let's say monthly income. What do? How do you ask monthly income? 0 to 20,000, 20,000 to 40,000, 40,000 to 60,000, 60,000 to 80,000. You have some categories, right? But how did you do that category? That is very important. For that, some background justification should be there. That is very important. That is what they say. Now, if you look at the age category, okay, age category, 18 to 60, okay, is considered as youth by WHO. Recently, WHO released data where they say up to the age of 60, they are considered as young age. But when we do it, we say 18 to 25, 25 to 45, something like that, right? So there should be some theoretical justification which should be given when you have some groups. That groups should have some justification. Now, let's say I wanted to do a study on millennials. What will be the age of the millennials now? Between 20 to 40, correct? If I want to do it on centennials, that is the generation Z, there will be not more than 20. Okay, those who are born after 2000 are called as centennials. So based on what kind of a study that I do, I need to come up with the categories. That is very important. Same kind of a category cannot be used for all the study. This 20 to 40,000, 40 to 60,000 income classification will not hold good if I do a study on elite people. Let's say I do a study on rich people. There I cannot ask 20,000 to 40,000, 40,000 to 60,000. That will not hold good. So based on what kind of a study that you do, you should be asking this classification that should be backed up by some theoretical distribution. That is very important. Okay. The next intermediate, what we call it as data transcription. What is this data transcription? Very, very simple. Now you have numbered the responses, correct? Now you have numbered the respondents. The responses all are numbered. There are some variables which we ask. Now let's say you can see I have asked, I have given an example. There is 10 consumer satisfaction statements or variables, which we call it as a variable. Okay. Now I'm numbering that statements, CS1, CS2, CS3. There are 10 statements. Now let's say I wanted to, I do a study on job satisfaction. Okay. So JS1, JS2, whatever the number of variables, that many number of JS1, JS2, JS3, that many number of codings will be there. That is labeling the variables. That is what we call it as a data transcription. This is actually an intermediary stage between the data coding and the data tabulation. Okay. So now we are speaking about the data processing, where the first one is the data editing. The second one is the data coding. The third one is the data classification. The next one is the data tabulation. In between classification and in between the coding and the tabulation, this is a intersection point, right? What is a data tabulation? Whatever that we have classified, we are making into tables. We are preparing in the form of tables. Very simple. Data is presented in the form of tables. It is given in the form of tables. That is what we call it as data tabulation. It is the process of summarizing the raw data and displaying them in a compact statistical table, and that is what we call it as a tabulation. You can see there is a simple table. I have given the census and the population. If you want to make it a little more complex, you can make the differentiation between the rural and the urban and the total population. Okay, right. Any statistical table, when you report, okay, when you do it in terms of for a article presentation or for a PhD or for any other report writing, yes, table should have these parts. Number one, it should have a heading or the title clearly indicating what the title is all about. You can see it here: rural and urban population of India during 1971-2011. And I have also given the units of measurement in thousands, not in lakhs, in thousands I have given it. And it should have a caption head or a box head. What is that actually we are measuring? Population. In what categories? Rural, urban, and total. What is the row heading? Census year. 71, 81, 91, okay, 2001, something like that. And this is the main body where you will have the numbers. What is the data of what is the rural population in 71? Okay, what is the urban population in 71? What is the total population in 71? So this is the main body of the table. And then end note, if you have anything to share, let's say when you make some t-test or f-test, then you will say at 1% level of significance or at 5% level of significance, something like that, right? So that, or a round of errors should be ignored, something like that. You wanted to give some end note. If there is any end note, you have to present it. And at last, source. Where did you take that source from? If you have taken up from some reference material, then you have to give that reference. Or if you have done it on your own by collecting the first-hand data, then you should mention as primary data, because it is your own data. Okay, so a table must have all these things. One is the title of the table, box head, row heading, main numbers or the data, the end note, and the source note. So these are the things which a statistical table should have. These are some of the you can read on your own. Good tabulation. What are the guidelines for a good tabulation? The main thing I'll be speaking about the main aspects of it. Number one, as simple as possible. The data table should always be precise, clear, okay, and simple. One. Number two, row and column should be definitely numbered. Number three, it should not be so big or so small. Okay, very, very important. Units of measurement is very important. When I speak about age, I should say in years, weight in kilograms, height in centimeters or meters. Okay, profit in terms of rupees or in terms of dollars, something like that. What is the unit of measurement that I do? That is very important, because what happened many of the time, we forget this unit of measurement. When you say height as 5'3", I may not know what is 5'3". Is it 53 centimeters or 5 feet or 3 inches, something like that? Okay, so I need to know, means we need to give the units of measurement. That is very important. And all the data or the figures should be properly aligned. Alignment is very important. It is very important. Okay, and very important thing is, do not abbreviate anything, at least in the table. In table, the abbreviations should be avoided, or it should be very, very minimal. Okay, so this is all about the data tabulation. Now we have done with the preparing the data for analysis. Now I'm going for the other concepts like reliability test, right? We saw what is data validity, correct? What is data validity? What to measure, how to measure, correct? Am I audible? Can you follow me? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Questions vandirka? I have not seen the. Okay. Okay. Let me continue. Give me a minute. Okay. Regarding the reliability, what do you mean by reliability? Very simple. Reliability means consistency. Okay. If I want to say in one word, what is reliability? I will say consistency. consistency is a very important dimension or an aspect for any research. If there are inconsistencies, then that data is not a reliable one. Okay, I prepare a questionnaire, I give it to you now, you answer me. Okay, I will give the same set of questionnaire after a week or after a month. You will give some other answers, and that answer and this answer, if it has wide variation, it means that those questions are not consistent enough. Okay, so in terms of consistency, there are three things which are there. You can see here. One is test retest reliability, that is based on the time frame. Okay, over and again. Okay, we call this as coefficient of stability. Sir, how do we do it? Very simple. Now I ask a question, I have some values. After 1 week, I'll ask the same questions, you'll come up with some answers. Okay, I will prepare a correlation between today's answer and after 1 week's answer. And if the correlation is more than 0.5 or 0.7 or 0.8, then there is a consistency. If the correlation is 0, then there is no consistency. Okay, so this is based on the time. The second one is across items. When I say items, I mean the variables which we ask. This is what I'm going to discuss today. Okay, across items, that is the internal consistency. This is where this Cronbach alpha reliability coefficient actually comes into picture. Okay, now let's say again, I'll come up with the same thing. Job satisfaction. I have 10 questions in job satisfaction. If there is 2 or 3 questions which are not related to job satisfaction, then there is no consistency. In the place of job satisfaction, I ask some other irrelevant questions. Then what happened? Consistency will not be there. How to check it? Again, this again depends on the multiple correlation only. All these are basically it works on multiple correlations. Okay. Then across different researchers. Now let's say there are some questionnaires which we can find it a structured questionnaire or a systematic questionnaire. Somebody would have created a question, okay, and the same questions we can use it. Okay, time and again it would have been tested. It would have been tested time and again and in various places. Now let's say there is one questionnaire, one set of questions. You may get a different answer in Europe or America. But if you ask the same questions in terms of Indian context, we may have a different answers. Because across the researchers, if you look at it, because of the different geographical distance, that's what we call it as inter-rater reliability. Again, that can be done by product moment correlation, which is nothing but Karl Pearson's correlation coefficient. Okay, what we normally do, or kappa. Okay, so there are some tests, but I'm not going to deal all these things. I'm going to see only this across items, that is internal consistency. Okay, now how to infer this? If your this Cronbach alpha ranges from 0 to 1. If it is less than 0.5, it is unacceptable. If it is between 0.5 and 6, again it's a poor indicator. If it is between 0.6 and 0.7, it's a questionable. If it's between 0.7 and 0.8, so technically speaking, your Cronbach alpha should be more than 0.7, then it is acceptable. If it is between 0.8 and 0.9, it is good. If it is more than 0.9 and almost moving towards 1, then it's an excellent. We can say that there is a consistency in our data or in our questions, basically. Okay, so this is what the reliability. Validity speaks about what question should be asked. Reliability speaks about the consistency of the measure. Okay, right. Now, a very important one, there is a normality test, is very, very important, because when we have to do an advanced statistical test like t-test, f-test, ANOVA, analysis of variance, okay, ANOVA, ANCOVA, MANOVA, okay, and all those things, then our data should be normally distributed. Only then these tests can be performed. You can see it here. And for that, You can see Carl Pearson's correlation coefficient, factor, cluster, regression, ANOVA, structural equation modeling. Everyone wants this, right? Everyone in the academic world, now they ask for this structural equation modeling. They are fond of, now it is the darling of the academic people, SEM. Okay. So if you want to perform all these things, then your data should be normally distributed, right? Now, how to check whether the data is normally distributed or not? Very simple. Number one, your questions should be measured or numerical in nature, which means your question should be either in interval scale or in ratio scale. Number one, as I said in the beginning. Number two, it is only applicable for the measurement scale. Now I have told this. Okay. Number three, every data should be independent of each other. My response should not be based on someone else's response. If that is the case, then it is not independent. Okay. And there is something called homogeneity of variance, which I'm not going to touch upon. So these are some of the conditions which should be fulfilled to apply parametric test. I'll focus more on the normal distribution alone. Okay. Right. How to check the normality of the data? Very simple. If your distribution is normally distributed, it means that your skewness is 0. You have something called skewness, correct? Skew means moving out of it, moving out of the origin. Okay. So if the skewness is 0, then you can say that your data is normally distributed. But many a times getting exactly 0 is practically not possible. You cannot get 0 exactly every time. Okay. And how can we check the skewness? There are three formulas. One is the Carl Pearson's coefficient of skewness, where I have we can see the formula 3 mean minus median by standard deviation, or we can do mean minus mode by standard deviation. This is one formula. Number two, we have Bowley's coefficient of skewness, where we have Q3 plus Q1 minus 2 median, that is Q2. Q2 is median, right? 50th. 2 median divided by Q3 minus Q1. Or we can go with Kelly's coefficient of skewness, where it is almost similar to Bowley. In Bowley, it is quartiles, 25, 50, 75, 100. Whereas in Kelly's, it is decile, 10, 20, 30. D9 plus D1 minus 2 median divided by D9 minus D1. So there are three ways in which you can calculate skewness. There is no hard and fast rule that which method should be followed. All the methods will almost have similar answer. There will be small change here and there, but there won't be a predominant big change. Significant change will not be there. Okay. I guess in SPSS, they use this Bowley's coefficient of skewness, if I'm not wrong. Okay. Because I have tried once, I have tried many times, and I think they go with this Bowley's coefficient of skewness in SPSS. Right. You can look at this. You can look at this curve. It's a unimodal curve, right? Which means only one mode, one big point. Okay. At this point, exactly, the mean, median, and the mode all will have the equal value. If mean, median, and mode are equal, you can be almost sure that your data is normally distributed. But it is not a confirmatory proof. Okay. Almost, you can be almost sure that your data is normally distributed, because this side, left side 50% is equal to the right side 50%. That is what the normal distribution means. Okay. You can see it here. That is what. Right. Now, what if your data is skewed? You can see here, it can be negatively skewed or it can be positively skewed. What is negative skewed? You can see it here. The left side is higher than the right side. Correct? So if the left side is higher, means left side there are more distribution. The values are more. Where mean is lesser than the median and it is lesser than mode. Let's take a very simple example. There are 50 students in your class. Let's assume. Okay. Many people have scored less than 50. Okay. Or less than 40, let's say. So there are many people who have scored less than 40. That's why your left side is more. Now let's say on the contrary, if many of the students have scored well, they have scored more than 60, then you can have positive skewness. You can see it here. 60 plus is more. So the right side will be more. That is what we call it as positively skewed, where the mean will be bigger than the median and it will be bigger than the mode. Okay. Right. You can see it here. Now, how can we then say whether my data is normally distributed or not? Very simple. there is a rule of thumb in statistics. If the skewness value ranges between -1 to +1, if the value of your skewness is between -1 to +1, you can be confident that your data is near normal, and you can very well say that the distribution is normally distributed. You can be sure of the normality of the data. Okay, so that's how the skewness is checked on. Okay, so this is about the skewness and the normality, right? Now I know what my normal distribution. Now I want to know the shape of my normal curve. What are the different types of, or the different shapes of the curve that I have it? You can see it here: mesokurtic, leptokurtic, platykurtic. Now again, I'll take the same example of the number of students in our class. Okay, let's take, there are 50 students in our class. Majority of the people, or majority of the students, have scored between 40 marks to 60 marks. So the range is very small, between 40 to 60. You can see it here. This is 40, this is 60. So there will be a steep curve. That's what we call it as a leptokurtic. Now my students have scored between 30 to 70, let's take. Then I'll have a normal curve. This is what we call 30 to 70. So that's called mesokurtic. No, now my when you take 30 to 70, the range is 40. When you take the values between 40 and 60, the range is 20. Now look at this platykurtic. Distribution is widespread. Now let's take in my class, the marks are between 10 to 90. So the range is 80. So it is widespread. That is why my curve is very, very, very flat. That's what is called, that is why it is called platykurtic. Okay, so my kurtosis or kurtosis, whatever the way we call it as, okay, it should be between -2 to +2. Again, it's a rule of thumb. Okay, so your skewness can be between -1 to +1, and your kurtosis or kurtosis can be between -2 to +2. Okay, with this, now I'll show you some live data. I'll show you. Yeah, hope you can see this questionnaire. Can you see this? Yes.
Yes, sir. It's
Okay.
visible, sir.
Just look into this. This is the title of the study: a study on the work-life balance and its influence on job satisfaction of a women teacher. Okay, this is how they have asked the question. Age, they are openly measuring. Okay, now can you say what scale is this age? Can you can some people chat? What scale is this age? Is it nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio? Let me look into chat. Exactly. So that's a ratio scale, because it has an origin. Thank you so much, my dear listeners. So age is measured in terms of ratio scale. Now look at this marital status: unmarried, married, separated, and widow. So they have 4 categories or classification. You can see this family type. They're asking whether they belong to nuclear family or a joint family. And they're also asking number of children. That is who are less than 18. Okay, 1 child, 2 children, more than 2 children. They have something like this. Age of children 1, child 1. Less than 5 years, 5 to 10 years, more than 10 years. Now they have some categories. Okay, classification. Monthly income, that is the respondents' monthly income. Less than 10,000, 10 to 20, 20 to 30, 30 to 40, 40 to 50, 50,000 and above. Okay, and the monthly income, that is inclusive of their spouse or any other working people. Okay, family monthly income less than 20, 20 to 40. They have asked like this. Okay, now with this, I'll show you the data. I'll show you what are all the errors that they have committed. Okay, now I have this data, right? This is the raw data which I have downloaded from Google Forms. Okay, this is how it has come. Okay, now if you look, married, nuclear family, okay, we have like this. Now all these things should be numbered. Now I cannot do with this postgraduate or undergraduate. I have to number everything. So that is what the process of data coding, which we call it as. Okay. Now I'll show you few mistakes which the respondents have committed. Which I have noted down. I'll filter. This is a random check that we do it now. Okay. Yeah. In marital status, let me choose only unmarried people. Okay. Unmarried. They are not married. Okay. Can you look into this option? This guy is at 25 years of age. This respondent is unmarried, but he says his first child is less than 5 years. Okay. And you can see here, one more person is unmarried, 27 years, and he says his second child is more than 10 years when he is unmarried. Okay. Maybe it may be possible, but not in the Indian context. Okay. This may be okay with the Western concepts, but until now, I don't know. For Indian context, I don't know how far it is applicable. So this is one mistake which I found out. Okay. The next one I'll tell you what are all the errors that I found. Marital status and age of child, I told you. Age and number of children. Yeah. Yeah, you can see it here. Married. Okay. You can see here. This guy is 27. He says he's unmarried. Number of children he's saying not applicable, which means that is not applicable for that. But in age of child 2, he says more than 10 years. If at all he has 2 babies, at least he should first mention what is the age of his first child, and then he should go for the second child, right? So these are the again mistakes that we can find it out. And this is how the data editing, this is the process of random check, and then I'm trying to identify what are all the possible errors that I can find out. Family type and number of adults. Yeah. You look at this. I select only nuclear family. Okay, I filter nuclear family. Okay, and I ask for the number of adults. Okay, you can see here how many number of adults are there in your home. Some people say 7 and 10. Okay, can you see it here? There are 10 adults in their family, and he says it's a nuclear family. When you have more number of peoples, that is apart from you and your spouse and your kid, then it cannot be a nuclear family, right? When you have 10 people at your home and telling that you belong to a nuclear family is again a ridiculous answer, right? So that is one thing which I wanted to say. Give me a minute. And there are plenty of you can see it here, number of earning members. Just a minute. Sometimes what happen, you can see the number of earning members. Okay, there are 1 to 9 earning members. You can see here 0 1. So 1 and 0 1 are same. So what should we do? We should choose this one and this one, and then convert everything into one only, so that you will not have 0 1. So these kind of errors also may arise. Okay, so that is also we should be very, very careful of. Then I'll show one more big mistakes which they have committed. Yeah, can you see this? Total experience in current institution. Okay, look at this, total experience in teaching. Okay, now I'll copy down this and put it in a new Excel. Okay, now this is a current teaching experience. This is the total work experience. Okay, now can my current teaching experience can be more than total experience? Is it possible? Yes, no? Can I have it in chat? Answers. Can my current experience be more than total experience? Is it possible? Definitely no, correct? But now look at this. Now what I do, for this is a random check which I do with my data. Okay, now what I do, I write it, I write it as difference. Okay. And I apply a very small formula equal to total experience minus current experience. Okay. I can have 0 because I'm working in one institution for quite some time. Okay. Now look at this. I've applied for all the 638 respondents. Now I filter again. Now look at this. All minus values I will choose. See, 12 people have responded not properly. Look at it. His current experience is 8 years, but his total experience is 4 years. You can see this, right? So these are all some of the major error which they may commit. So just like that, downloading the data from the Google Docs or Excel and then straight away taking it to the analysis will definitely lead us to the wrong answers. Okay. And with one more thing, I'll wind up. I'll just give me a minute. I'll just open up my SPSS. I don't know why SPSS is not opening. Just give me a minute. I'll stop sharing. My SPSS is not working properly. Give me a minute. Hope I am not boring.
No, sir.
I'm just waiting for my SPSS to open. At right time, it doesn't work properly. This is a technical snag that we have it. I wanted to show how this reliability test can be performed and how to check the skewness. Okay. Probably if it doesn't work in, with respect to skewness, if it doesn't work in SPSS, I'll show you how to do it in Excel itself. Okay. I'll take this example itself. Okay. Yeah, I'll go with this point. I'll show the question. Oh, 1 minute, 1 minute. I have to share the screen to you. Give me a minute. Yeah, I'm sharing my screen again. Oh, yes, my SPSS has opened. Thank you so much. Great. Okay. Yeah, it's open. Okay, now let me show this questionnaire to you. Now, I have some set of questions. Can you see this here? 2.1 to 2.15. This is work related problems. I have asked 15 questions. Okay. This is where the data. Okay. From Y, from column Y, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. I'll just copy, put it in new. Okay. Now, first, let me convert this into numbers. What is the value of strongly agree? 5, correct? Replace all. It has made. Then, what is the value for agree? It is 4, right? Then, neutral or undecided, that will be replaced with what number? 3. Replace all. Okay. Now, there's something called disagree, right? You can see it here, but it is not disagree. It is dis 4. Why? Because you have converted agree to 4. That is why it has converted to dis 4. Okay. So you should not be, you should not panic yourself. Okay. Instead, replace dis 4 with 2. And strongly 2 means strongly disagree. Correct? Strongly 2 with 1. Okay, that is strongly disagree. Now everything is over. Let me check it again. All the 15. Okay, I will filter it. You can see 1 to 5. So there is no blanks left, which means all the 15 questions, all the 638 respondents have completely answered everything. There is no blanks which are left. Okay. Okay. Now I'll save this in my folder. Today's date 11/6/2021. I have saved it. Okay. Now I'll open this in. I'll close this. Okay, it's not required for me. Yeah. Now I'll open it in my SPSS. Open. The data is in Excel. It's in my desktop. Yeah, 11/6. That's the name that we gave it for that file. And again, make it to .sav and give open. A checkbox will arrive. Yeah. Give OK. Yes. Now look at the questionnaire. How many questions are there? 15 questions are there. Related to what? Related to work-related problems. Whether is there any consistency is there across items? I told you, right? So we are going for Cronbach alpha, analyze, scale, reliability analysis. Now I want to compare the consistency of all these 15 variables. It is not going to happen for one variable. You cannot check it for each variable. It is going to happen for all the set of 15 variables. Is all the 15 variables are reliable? Okay. I take all the 15 and transfer it to the right side. Already there is an alpha. That is what the Cronbach alpha, which means, okay, there are many methods, split half, Gutman, parallel. Okay. There are plenty of choices are there. I'm going with only Cronbach alpha, giving okay. Yeah. Can you look at this value now here? What is the number of items? 15 variables. What is the Cronbach alpha? 0.922, which means that there is a consistency with all that 15 statements. So all the 15 questions are having validation and also the reliability. There is a reliable. The data is consistent. The questions are consistent. Okay. So that is one thing. Then now I want to check the skewness. Now, what are these scales are made up of? What scale? Nominal, ordinal, interval, ratio. Now give me the answer in chat box. All these 15 questions, look at this questionnaire. Yeah. Now you can able to tell me what scale has been used for these questions. Is it nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio? Perfect. It's an interval scale, right? Now, since it's an interval scale, I can go for parametric test analysis. Okay. Now look at this. I go for analyze, descriptive statistics. In that, there is something called explore. I click on explore. Let me do for only one variable. You can do for all 15 also at simultaneously you can do, but I'll just do it for one. Okay. I'll have transferred the first variable in statistics. I don't want anything. Okay. If you want, okay. I'll go for plots. I need histogram. Stem and leaf will be already checked. So don't do anything with that. And normality plot with test, continue. Click on histogram and normality plot with test, continue. Options also, you don't need to do anything. Just click OK. Can you see it here? What is the mean value? 3.676. What is the median? 4. You will not get the mode here. Correct? Okay. Instead, yeah, you can see the skewness value. Look at the skewness value. It is minus 0.666, which is very well less than -1. Therefore, you can conclude that that first variable is normally distributed. Okay, so you can apply parametric test for that variable. Okay, you can see the normality. I'll show you. Just give me a minute. Okay. There's one more way to do this. I'll do the same. Descriptive statistics, frequencies. Okay, I go it here. I transfer the first variable like how I did it for the similar. I don't want any frequency tables. I'll go here in statistics, check for the quartiles, Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4, standard deviation, range, minimum, maximum, mean, median, mode. I want the skewness value, kurtosis value, continue, chart. I check histograms with the normal curve, continue, and give OK. You can see it here. What is my skewness? Minus 0.666. What is my mean? 3.676. What is my median? 4. What is my mode? 4. Can you look the values? All are almost similar. With this itself, I can to an extent conclude whether my data is normally distributed or not. And this value minus 0.666 minus 0.666 has ensured that the data is near normal. It is not exactly normal, but it is near normal. Look at the chart. It's perfect. Now, let me do it for all the 15 in one shot. Look at the, this is the software which we cannot even think of. Okay. Yeah, you can look into the graph. Look at it. Perfect. It's almost like a normal distribution curve, right? Almost. Look at the curve for each and every variable. For 15 variables, we are doing it now. It is almost similar. Okay. Now, let me check the skewness value. Look at it. Minus 0.666, 0.011, minus 0.026, minus 0.194. Okay. Almost everything is less than 1. Therefore, I can conclude that all my 15 variables are normally distributed and I can apply for further parametric test. Now, with this, I'm coming into the almost fag end of my presentation. I'll give some tips for a better analysis. So normally we have this inferential statistics, right? That is the t-test, f-test, whatever, we infer something out of it. So there are some steps into it. Number one, we must have or we must formulate a hypothesis. Okay. We have this null hypothesis, alternative hypothesis, and other things. I'm not getting into those aspects. So first, create a hypothesis or formulate a hypothesis. Number two, decide your significance level, whether it is 5% or 1%. What is the level of significance? It means that the probable of or the probability of making an error. When I say 5%, then there is a probability of answer going wrong to the extent of 5%. On the contrary, it means with 95% confidence, I say that what I have done is right. If I want to increase more accuracy, then go for 1% level of significance, which means that there is only 1% probability of going wrong and 99% confidence that what I do is right. Then choose what appropriate statistical test, whether it's a t-test or a f-test, what kind of a test should be used. That again depends on what kind of an objective, and then do the calculation and then do the inference. So these are the way to do the statistics. And the different types of study, when we do all this PhD and other things, it's basically a cross-sectional study, which means that we are asking various questions for only one point of time. We are not going to continue the same again and again. Okay, only at one point of time we collect it. That's called cross-sectional data. If you collect one variable at different points, then that's called time series. If you collect various questions various times, then that's called panel data. And data can also be classified as raw data, discrete data, and continuous data. And we should also know about the distributions. There are totally 9 distributions in statistics: binomial, Poisson, normal. All these 3 are together called theoretical distribution. Okay, and apart from that, we have the other distributions which I have mentioned. Okay, and when to use parametric, when to use non-parametric. Okay, there are some classifications here, and it's very simple. Univariate Very simple. Only the words are little complicated. Uni one. I study about only one variable, univariate. I study about two variable, bivariate. I study about more than two variables, multivariate. That's it, over. Okay. So, and I can also divide the same way into parametric and non-parametric. For every parametric test, there is an equal non-parametric test which are available. Okay. If your data is not normal, then you can resort to non-parametric test. People say that parametric test is most scientific. Not necessarily. Okay. If that is the case, then we will not have non-parametric test. Why should we have non-parametric test? Right? The so-called the most in academic field we use the chi-square so well. This chi-square is a non-parametric test. It's not a parametric test. Okay. So for every parametric test, there is an equivalent non-parametric test which are available. Right now, when your dependent variable is nominal and your independent is also nominal, go for crosstabs. That is chi-square. Okay. If your independent variables are interval, then you can go for discriminant analysis, logistic regression kind of a thing. If your dependent is ordinal and your independent is nominal, go for non-parametric test. If it is interval, go for multiple ordinal regression. If your if your dependent variable is interval or ratio and your independent variable is nominal, go for t-test or ANOVA. And if both are in interval and ratio, then you can go for multiple correlation, multiple linear regression, okay, structural equation modeling, and so on. Okay, so these are the things. Univariate. In univariate, you have for one sample, chi-square, Kolmogorov-Smirnov test, run test, sign test, and we have so many things. If it's two or more samples, that is bivariate, then we have again sign test, Wilcoxon, McNamara. Okay, there are plenty of tests, non-parametric tests are available. And if in case of parametric, for one sample we have t-test, z-test. For two samples we have t-test again, independent sample t-test we have, paired sample test we have, z-test we have, ANOVA, that is analysis of variance, one way, two way, both we have. And there are plenty of tests which are available. And when it is multivariate, if it is one dependent variable, then we can go for ANOVA, multiple regression, discriminant, conjoint, cluster analysis. There are plenty of analysis which are available. And with this one or two slides, I'll wind up my session. And in statistics, we have now we can be classified into three types. One is the descriptive statistics, which actually speaks about the description which has already happened or which actually describes. Now I'll say that now let's say what is my population now? 435 people are attending my session now. There is nothing new that I can infer out of this. This is just a descriptive statistics. I can say that 435 people attended this session. That 435 is a descriptive statistics. Okay. Predictive means I can infer something out of it. With this data, how many people will come for my next seminar? If I can able to do that, then that's called predictive statistics. And that's how these predictions are all made. Now they say, right, when will this corona get over? Okay, all this, there are some mathematical statistical models which are happening. And can I understand something out of that? And if at all there is some issues which are going to happen, how can I reduce that problem? If I have an answer for that, then that's called prescriptive statistics. This is a very, very new, there are many studies which are going in statistics on prescriptive statistics. Okay. Predictive statistics means what is likely to happen in the future. Whereas prescriptive means highest level where it is used for choosing optimal actions. Okay. Now, what will be the price of the petrol for the next 1 month or 2 months? If I know that, then that's called predictive. If it is really going to increase, then what is the alternative way that I have it? If I can have answer for that, then that's called prescriptive analysis. So that is what descriptive is what happened in the past. Predictive is what happened in the future, and prescriptive is what is the best that I can do to minimize my problems. Okay. So these are the other things which I have it. These are some of the good books which I want my people to read. These are some fantastic textbooks. There are some good Indian textbooks which are available. If you really wanted to excel in statistics, the first thing that you need to do is to have a robust research methodology, because unless you are strong with the methodology, statistics is not it's not going to come easily, because statistics is a very simple subject, I would say. Okay. See, I come from a very, very marginalized background. If I can do statistics, then why not you? Okay, maths has always been a fear for me, but now I have started loving statistics is only because of the strong methodology. Unless you know the methodology, unless you're strong about it, then it is very difficult. And today in research, we give more importance only to the statistical techniques. I always say this in many places. Statistical techniques are just the modes of transport. See, now I have bicycle, I have two-wheeler, I have four-wheeler, I have a separate plane, I have a private jet. Just because I have a private helicopter, I cannot go to my college in helicopter. Correct? Why? Because that is not feasible. So statistical techniques are like the transport. What is your objective? Where should you go? If I want to go to my college, I should go either by cycle or by two-wheeler or by four-wheeler. If I have to go to some other country, then I can take my private jet. So based on your objective, your statistical techniques should be considered. Just because you have some data, you cannot apply t-test, f-test, z-test. No, not necessary. What is your objective of the study? That actually determines the appropriate statistical technique. Okay. Yeah, you can see it here. These are some good jokes which I have it. Basically, this is the joke which I really like. I used to think correlation implied causation. We all know that if you want to apply correlation, both the variables should be independent in nature. One will not be dependent on other. Okay. If it is dependent on other, then it's called causation effect, cause and effect. Okay. In correlation, there is no cause and effect. Correlation will decide whether there is a relationship between two variables or not. That's all. Then the person says, then I took a statistics class. Now I don't. Why? Because he has taken a statistics class and the students have not scored. Then he has come to a question that, okay, now just because of my teaching, it is not having an impact on the students. So sounds like, that's a good joke that I can have it. So thank you so much. Thanks for the patience listening. I hope I have done my part a little, whatever that I might be. Now I am ready to take answers, means I am ready to take questions. I will try to answer. If I do not know, I'm really sorry. I will learn it and then probably tomorrow, let me try to answer. Thank you. I am just stopping to share. I'll stop sharing the screen and yeah, I'm ready to answer. Please give your constructive feedback. Yeah.
Yes, please raise your hands.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, sir. A very good evening. And it was a very wonderful session. As I learned a lot, as I'm a very beginner and
Okay.
I just don't know. I just seen this SPSS live example also for the very first time. So actually, this was just a trailer for me. But in actual, I want to know that, like for this SPSS, this statistics, it is to be done for every topic, like for marketing topic, if it is like seeing consumer behavior, like for means not a very finance topic, like for marketing topic, and this topic also we have to find out statistics, as I am a very fresher for research, so I just want to know that.
Yeah, again, that depends on what kind of a study that we do. See, I mainly today have spoken from the quantitative side of it, but there are plenty of marketing study which are qualitative in nature. Okay, because if you take research, there are two big dimensions. One is the quantitative aspect, the other one is the qualitative aspect. Today, qualitative study is also becoming more popular. So depends on what kind of a study that you do. Okay, whether it is quantitative or qualitative, we have to take a call. So we as a researcher take a call on it, whether does it require a quantitative justification. If it requires a quantitative justification, then we'll go for a quantitative model where we prepare some questionnaires, we collect the data firsthand, and then we try analyzing the means we analyze the data, and then we come up with some inferences. Okay, so again, it depends on our objective. Not all
Like first,
requires quantitative study. Not at all. Not at all.
that's one small doubt. Like I have thought one topic in my mind. Right now, I'm an MPhil scholar.
Okay.
So I have thought the study of customer perception of youth towards branded fashion apparel in XYZ city. So for as I'm a very beginner, I don't know about So for this, like this SPSS tool, what you have seen, all this technique will be applied for this topic. It is in
Yes.
the okay. We have
Yes.
to do.
Yes, because since you are dealing with the brand perception, it should be measured, right? Now, if you say
Okay.
customer perception, how do you measure the customer perception? You have some scales, right? Only because
Okay.
of that scales you measure it. So it's a kind of a quantitative study. So it
Okay.
requires quantitative justification. There are plenty and plenty of studies which have been made in this topic. You can
Yes, sir.
go through the review of literature. You can refer
Yes.
to Shodh Ganga. Shodh Ganga is the reservoir of all the theses of all the Indian universities. There are plenty of topic on this. Probably you please go through some 10 to at least 10 to 20 PhD articles, with which you will get some good idea. You will get that conceptual grip of the subject. Then you will be in a position to frame the questionnaire, what should I ask and what should I not ask. This clarity will come to you only when you do the review of literature. That is why we say review of literature is very, very important when we choose our study, because we need to have that conceptual clarity. When we are not knowing what to do, then we may not be in a position. See, now I know where to go. Now I know I have to address this seminar. Okay, what should I do? I should open my laptop. I should go to Zoom. I should open it. Now I know, since I know, I'm doing it perfectly. If I do not know how to do it, then I may not proceed, or I'll be struck. Okay, so similarly, before doing any research, do extensive review of literature. That will really help us to have that grip over the subject, because you are the master of the subject. I'm telling you, all the researchers, you are the masters of your own topic, not even your guides. I'm telling you, because guide may just guide you, but they may not know the intricacies of the subject. Only you, since you do extensive review of literature, you will have the command over it. And that's why all the scholars, I insist all the scholars to have extensive review of literature. Hope I have answered you, Ma. Thank you. Thank you all for the constructive feedback.
Hello.
Yes.
Good evening, sir. Very nice session. This is Netra here from Bangalore.
Okay.
Sir, I have one doubt. Usually, the data will be, we say that it's cleared a normality test. If any data is abnormal, means at the time of data analysis, if we found that the data is abnormal, so then we say like we have to go to which parametric test?
Non-parametric test. When your data is not normal or non-normal, then you can resort it to non-parametric test. Because in non-parametric test, see, very simple. What is the simple difference between parametric and non-parametric? Parametric test means for doing that test, there are some parameters which should be fulfilled. There are some assumptions or parameters which should be fulfilled. If it doesn't fulfill that, then you can always resort it to non-parametric test, because for performing non-parametric test, there is no condition. There is no assumptions which has to be met. That is why I'm saying, if your data is not normal, go for non-parametric test, because for every parametric test, there is an equivalent non-parametric test which are available. For example, t-test. What is this t-test means? It examines the difference between two groups. Okay. Now let's say I have done with my session. Okay, now there is some data which has been collected on my on my seminar, how good it is. Okay, somebody will say strongly agree, somebody will say strongly disagree. Okay, now there are two groups, male and female. Now among this 500 people, let's take there are 200 male. I will add up their values. I'll add up the female values also. I'll look into the mean. Is there any significant difference? This is a parametric. for this parametric t-test, I similarly have some non-parametric t-test. So when your data is non-normal, go for non-parametric test. Very simple. As simple as that. Any other questions? Tomorrow's session will be a good one because tomorrow is the main, that is the data analysis. Hope people will enjoy that too. Any other questions?
Hello.
Yes, yes, madam.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Good evening.
I'm really happy. Very good section. Excellent class, sir. Really
Thank you.
opened my eyes. I have a doubt. Like in every report, they ask for report of reliability, normality, and validity. For
Okay.
reliability, we have done Cronbach alpha, and for normality, we have done as skewness. And the Curtis value lies between -3 to +3, no, sir, or -2 to.
That is what. See, this is basically a rule of thumb. Okay. This is basically a rule of thumb, which means that out of the so many years of experience, the statisticians have given this as a rule of thumb.
Yes, sir.
It is, when I say kurtosis is between -2 to +2, my answer is also right. Similarly, yours is also right. You say -3 to +3, right?
Yes,
See,
sir.
if it is really between -2 to +2, it is good, but it can be diluted up to 3. That is where that -3 to +3 comes. Okay, it can be diluted from -2 to -3, but not beyond that.
Okay,
So there is no hard and fast rule about the numbers. So it is all about the rule of thumb. Okay, even in few cases, when I say about skewness, I said about -1 to +1. Correct?
Yes, yes.
But few statisticians, they also compromise and dilute up to -2. But I don't prefer that -2 in terms of skewness. Okay, between -1 to +1, it's better. And it also again depends on what is your sample size and other things. There are plenty of other factors which actually decides. If your data is more in number, then we can slightly compromise the values. But if the data is very less, or say 100, 200 or something like that, then we should be a little more strict in our values. You're right, in a way. That is -3 to +3. If your sample size is higher, then you can dilute up to -3. Yes. Thank you for making me to say that point. That's a good point which people will have it.
Any other questions? Please raise your hands.
Sir, just one doubt, sir.
Yes, sir.
Sir, how to test the content validity, sir? You also taught us about reliability and the normality. Is there any formula? Content validity. No.
Content validity, to my knowledge, I'm saying, okay, I may be right, I may be wrong. Please correct me if I'm wrong. See, content validity speaks about what question you are going to ask. And that question should be relevant to the topic. That is what I told you in the beginning. And that's why I'm saying, once you are done with the questionnaire or the tentative questionnaire, please read out yourself after 1 or 2 days. Give some break, because if you are continuously into that preparing questionnaire, then our thinking process will be slightly difficult. So once you prepare the tentative questionnaire, forget it. After 2-3 days, look into the questionnaire and now think whether this question is really needed for this topic. 1. Number 2, even after you feel that that question is really required, okay, you show that to the subject matter experts. You show that to the subject matter experts who are good in that area. They may be also having some points which you can add up to. That's why if you see, that's the actually role of the DC members and other things in case of PhD or the subject matter experts, okay. So they may be in a better position to say whether that question is really needed or not, whether that is valid for the topic or not. So there is no hard and fast mathematical calculation or a formula. I don't think so. So this is my answer. Hope if you have anything else to add it, you can also add, sir. Okay. Anything else?
Okay, sir.
It's all.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I once again thank all my professors at this point of time. If you have really given a good feedback, it belongs to them. If the feedback is to be improved, then it belongs to me. Okay, because again and again, time and again, I always thank my professors, without whom I am not here today. Okay. Again, once again, I thank the Patrician College and the organizers and the team who has really dedicatedly, taken up all pains to have this wonderful session. And thank you all listeners. Cheers, happy reading, happy researching. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. So we are in the end of the session. I call Professor Janathanan to give vote of thanks.
Good evening to everyone. I, on behalf of Patrician College of Arts and Science and the entire fraternity of the institution, first of all, extend my most sincere thanks to Almighty. On my own behalf, I extend a very hearty vote of thanks to the chief guest of Dr. Vijay Narayanan, AG, Assistant Professor, PG and Research Department, DG Vaishnav College, Chennai, who spared time from his busiest schedule to grace the occasion. Thank you, sir. Thanks for your very nice presentation and sharing our valuable and fruitful information about preparing data analysis. Thank you, sir. I would like to take this opportunity to place a record of our hearty thanks to our director and secretary, Dr. Arogiraj, our academic director, Fatima Vasant, our principal ma'am, Dr. Usha George, and our vice principals, ma'am, SIFT 1 and SIFT 2, for the perfect logistic support and guidance to grant success in this program. I also extend my thanks to IQAC coordinator and our department organizers of head Dr. Sweetie Regina Mary, head of the department, and Professor Kalayarasan sir for their wonderful efforts to success in this PDP. And my express and sincere thanks to all the participants who always actively and enthusiastically participated in this professional development program in a grand success. Once again, I thank to each and everyone. Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So thank